A lot of times I look at young guys and I do think, when a guy gets married, he feels like he's given up his freedom. This is something that is generally true of guys. But in the old days, in my day, when you got married, you also felt that you were getting something of infinite value, which was getting somebody who would give you a home, give you some place where you belonged and where you were the father, you had authority, you had some. A lot of that's gone. I mean, it seems to me that if you marry someone who's working just as hard as you are, if you're marrying someone who is not as interested in making a home as you might want a home, what are you getting? I mean, what is in it for guys now to become fathers, to become husbands?
Well, I think if you're coming at it from a Christian perspective, then you get to live out some of the mystical union between God and his church. And I know that as a Catholic, as Christians, that's what we believe, that marriage is this peak, if you will, into this love that God has for his bride, which is his church, that we can't fully understand while we're here on earth. And God gives us this union between man and woman and says, love each other the way that I love my church, whether that's the respect, whether that's the all controversial term of submission, which we know does not mean subservience. He tells us that this is a peek into the union between us as God's children and God. And so it doesn't have to be a situation where you're talking about a 1950s housewife who cleans the house in her high heels and has her husband's dinner on the table for him when he comes home from work every day. That's fine if that's what you want to do, but it doesn't have to be practically set up like that for you to have this really solid, and I'm talking about culturally solid in addition to spiritually, this really culturally solid institution that prevents a lot of societal ills, right? You don't have people on welfare as often when they're married. You don't have people that are mentally ill. You don't have people that are physically ill as often when they're married. You don't have people that are committing crimes as often as when they are married. And when it comes to children are, I think, 82% less likely to live in poverty if they have a married mother and father. This institution is advantageous to our society in literally every single aspect, no matter how we're looking at it. And yet we've thrown it to the side. We've allowed communists who want the destruction of the family because they want people dependent on government to tear this down. We've allowed feminists who, for who knows what reason, whether it's self-hatred, whether it's abuse, whether it's misunderstanding of empowerment, we've let all these different radical groups tear down the institution of the family, and it's cost us our culture.
That's first of all, that it's a great answer, the answer that it is a spiritual relationship and a peek into spirituality, because I found that to be literally the case. I mean, one of the reasons I came to God was understanding that this love that I was experiencing went far beyond this marriage, and the marriage was a symbol of something, and I was living that symbol. It actually does happen. It actually does work in real life. Putting the left aside for a minute, and how I wish we could, something seems to have gone terribly wrong with the internet, with social media, with the dissolution, the distancing of from one another in physical terms. Guys watching pornography and actually having more fun with pornography than with a human being. People thinking that they are friends, people bullying each other. Is there any way around this, or is this our fate?
No, I mean, it comes back to the same cultural institutions, right? So one of the reasons that so many men are addicted to pornography or turn to pornography is because of a godlessness in our society. The reason, in my opinion, that godlessness is on the rise is because you're no longer allowed to talk about God. You're no longer allowed to talk about faith in the public sphere. You're not allowed to even say the word God in during the Pledge of Allegiance in public schools. This used to be, Drew, something that was taught to children from when they were very young. We understood, as our founders intended, that our free society, our constitutional republic, was made for a moral people and would not continue to exist for another. That was literally, the founding fathers said that when they created our nation, and that was taught to children. It's no longer taught to children. In fact, religious freedom is ridiculed. It's actually persecuted in many ways when people live out their faith in the public sphere. And so this has cost us this really important foundational aspect of our society, which has led to things like objectifying women and the degradation of marriage. And I'm talking about pornography with both of those two things. And it's cost us this moral compass that we have, which, I mean, you can look at what's happening in Hollywood. You can look at the songs that are on the top of the charts. You can look at Cardi B's WAP, and you can see that conservatives haven't really been winning the culture war if that's the kind of stuff that's reigning supreme right now.
You know, it's funny, there's an argument going on among conservatives, an insane argument where somebody, Yaff, I think, made a joke about making a big deal about licensing reform, professional licensing reform, which actually is an important subject. But there are all these right-wing intellectuals saying, no, we must talk about this. And I thought, like, yeah, if you want to lose every election from now until forever, because these are the things that are actually affecting people's lives. I really do believe that. Well, you know, when you talk about people falling away from God, now, obviously, the left is hostile toward God. They've actually booed God at one of their conventions. But they don't have the power to simply talk people out of their faith. Something else seems to me to have been happening. I mean, is there a natural progression away from God as technology becomes more, ubiquitous, or is there something else that's going on? Is there a way back, I guess, is the question I really want to ask you.
I don't know if I would point a finger at technology, because technology in and of itself also has the power to do immense good. It has the power to allow the gospel to be heard by people who maybe wouldn't have otherwise heard it. I think honestly that some of the fault lies within the Christian churches, whether it's the Catholic Church, whether it's the dying Protestant churches in our country, whether it's evangelicals who have great intentions, but have sometimes set their cultural institutions. They've separated themselves from cultural institutions and created their own alternative institutions, which I understand why they do. But in the whole cultural situation, churches have failed to respond to people when they are getting bombarded by all these anti-God messages. They have failed to say, here's why you're here. Let us teach you why you're here. Let us teach you how to refute this propaganda that you're hearing, this anti-Christian propaganda that you're hearing. Let us steep you in God's word. Let us, allow you to be to evangelize to other people by equipping you with the tools that you need. Churches haven't done that very well, I don't think, over the last century. Maybe in the Catholic Church since Vatican II, the Catholic Church hasn't done a very good job of it. And the price of that is many Christians go to church out of habit. Many Catholics attend Mass out of habit and aren't actually sure why they believe what they profess to believe. And the fault of that, of course, can't be laid at the feet of the public schools. That is the fault of the breakdown of the family, because parents aren't passing their faith along, and church and spiritual leaders who ought to be really hammering home to their congregations why it's so important that we believe what we believe.